you're watching One on One, and I'm Zan Azli. Today, our guest is YB Khairy Jamaluddin, Minister of Youth and Sports. Thank you very, very much for giving us the time.
Most welcome.
Okay, let's get straight to it.
Okay.
Commonwealth Games,
Yeah.
right? It just ended. There have been statements, you've made the explanations and all that. Is it really, really a bad showing by Malaysia, even though we didn't reach the target?
Well, you have to look at the performance in totality and benchmark it against previous Commonwealth Games. For instance, in New Delhi in 2010, we won 12 gold medals. And this time around we won just 6. So that's half of our haul in New Delhi in 2010. And although you can measure sports performances by the performance of our athletes in other tournaments, in other championships, in their personal bests, world rankings, but there is an expectation among the public you have to deliver at the big games like the Commonwealth Games. So although 6 gold medals out of a 7 gold medal target is not disastrous, but it still didn't meet the target. And to start off with, the target was much lower than what we won in New Delhi, which was 12 gold medals. So that has raised a lot of questions about our planning. And you have to remember that the preparation for the Commonwealth Games started in 2011. It was a 4-year program. So when this 4-year program comes to an end after the Asia Games this year, I can sit down and plan for the next 4 years based on where we are today. Ideally, we shouldn't be planning to achieve something far less than what we achieved 4 years ago. That's what happened this time around.
Yeah. So what's the plan now, moving forward?
Well, I think the first thing is that all this finger-pointing business should stop. That's why I said I will take responsibility as Minister, even though I've only been here for a year plus, and this program's been going on for the last 4 years. But I said that so that there will be no more blaming of anybody. I took full responsibility, but the most important thing for me to do is to identify where the weaknesses are. We've spent a lot of money on preparing our elite athletes over the last 4 years, and I think we want to see, and the public wants to see, returns on investment. Returns, as I said, not just about gold medals, but sustained, consistent performance at the highest level. So what I will do is, after the Asia Games is done, I will ask for a performance audit to be performed, to be undertaken on the elite athlete development program under the National Sports Council. That will take a couple of months because I need an independent expert panel to do this, and I'm going to get people from overseas to do this because we can't get people involved in Malaysian sports to audit themselves. So once we've audited it, see where the weaknesses are. Have we been spending the right money in the right places? Have we gotten value for money? Have we been spending enough on coaches, on training stints? Have we identified the right sports? Then towards the end of the year, we can start identifying and planning for the next 4 years how we're going to spend that money.
Right, okay. Now, there was this big issue during the opening of the Commonwealth Games. I think I first saw it on Twitter by a friend of mine, Umar Pagan, who requested to see if we could actually have our Malaysia Airlines stewards and stewardesses march together with our athletes. Did it happen? It didn't happen, right?
Well, I left for the UK one night before, one night after the MH17 tragedy happened. As I was watching the news come in, I already thought of what the implication was going to be and what the implications were for our contingent in Glasgow. And I thought that we should do, as early as when it was happening, I thought that we should do something in remembrance of the victims, as this is a terrible tragedy. second tragedy for MAS this year. And coincidentally, a few days later, I think Uma Pagan had tweeted that, but the wheels were already in motion for us to do this. Right. I wanted the athletes to wear the Malaysian Airlines uniform. There was some discussion whether it should be all the athletes or some of the athletes, and I decided that for maximum impact, the front row would be quite nice. You can't have the Malaysian Airlines crew march with the contingent because
they're not athletes, right?
Yeah, the regulations are very strict.
Yeah.
Only accredited officials are allowed. Even the uniform, the mass uniform, we had to just do it really without sanction from the organisers, because Emirates was the sponsor and they weren't very keen.
Right.
But I told the chef de mission, I said, Dr. Ong, I said, the head of the contingent, I said, just do it. This is our tribute. And even the half-mast flag that Fatihah was carrying, unfortunately they didn't allow it. So I told them to bring scissors and tape and do it when they were handed the flag. And that's what they did. They lowered it themselves. Our athletes lowered it themselves. And Fatihah, who was carrying the flag, she would have also been wearing the Malaysian Airlines uniform, but she's a cyclist and she's got thunder thighs, and she couldn't fit into the petite uniform. But the impact was there. There's a front row was wearing the steward and stewardess uniform. That was really touching.
Yeah, it was a very good gesture, I think. Yeah. Okay, and there was also this big controversy. We have our Malay rights movement like Perkasa calling for an apology because they had Scottish Terriers leading the contingents. What's your take on that?
I mean, that's really stupid, isn't it? I mean, it wasn't an issue for anybody apart from them. They weren't asking our athletes to carry the Terrier. They weren't asking our Muslim athletes to hold and fondle the dogs or anything like that. It's just every contingent was led out by a Scottish person bringing together the Terrier.
A really cute Terrier.
It's part and parcel of what they feel is an identity of Scotland.
Yeah.
So we respected that. I mean, it's much ado about nothing, and typical trying to sensationalize something which I don't think anybody fell for.
Yeah.
It's really silly.
Okay, on the sports development, I think one sport that's really close to your heart is football, right? I heard your speech, you talked about Malaysian Football DNA. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. What is a Malaysian Football DNA?
When we studied, before we launched the National Football Development Plan and Programme on the 10th of April by the Prime Minister, I hired a new director for development, Lim Tiong Kim, who was a former Malaysian national footballer, and he's been coaching the Bayern Munich youth team for many years now before he decided to come back. One of the things that he told me, and subsequently when we did further research, we found this to be true, is that the emerging footballing powers today have a distinctive style of play that suits their particular country. So if you look at Germany, you look at the Netherlands, you look at Spain, well, arguably perhaps that particular philosophy needs to be updated. But whatever it is, that particular philosophy of Spain, tiki-taka, whatever you want to call it, passing, won them a World Cup and 2 European Championships. So they adapted their local football environment to a particular style of play which they identified. In Malaysia, unfortunately, we don't have a DNA, a style of play, a philosophy that favours us. If you look at the national team, it's still very much let's kick the ball upfield and hope and pray that somebody runs after it, which is not really, it doesn't suit us very well. You kick the ball upfield into space, we might lose out in terms of size, our forward chasing the ball, and the defender who's bigger than him might outmuscle him. So we have to be more discerning with our style of play, something that fits in with our style of play, which takes into account the fact that we're not the biggest in the world, but also takes into account the fact that we can be fast and we can be tactically and in terms of technique quite superior. So Tiong Kim is building a new DNA of football, and ensuring that that imprint is left on our kids. I mean, this program that we start is between 7 and 17, so you're really going to see the fruits of this program in about 10 years. Unfortunately, we can't do much for the senior squad right now, because that's years of development in a different way. But we can start now, and that's why we've identified a particular style of play which we think is suitable for Malaysian football.
Okay, how has the I know it's new, NFVP, but what's the progress so far? You happy with it?
So far so good. One of the challenges that we have is in ramping up the numbers of centres that we have. So we have training centres in, hopefully we will have training centres in every single daerah, in every single district in Malaysia. At the moment we have less than 20% set up, but the whole plan is within 6 years, by 2020, we'll have 2 centres in every district. One for kids between the age of 7 to 12, primary school, the other one for kids between the ages of 13 and 17, secondary school. So the whole process now is to ramp up the number of centres, the number of accredited coaches, and also the number of players that we identify. So now we have about 5,000 kids in the system. By 2020 we'll have 50,000 kids in the system. So it's a process of adding the numbers, but also ensuring that the quality is there. That's why Tiong Kim runs a lot of coach education clinics, to make sure that the coaches that we get into the system, into the NFVP system, really understand the philosophy and really understand the DNA and really understand the techniques of how to be a good coach for junior players. We have a project 2019 team, which is the team that we want to push forward for qualification for the 2019 Youth World Cup. Still quite not quite there yet, but it's a start, and we've been giving them exposure, not just in Malaysia, but they recently went to Germany, had a round tour in Germany, played with the youth teams of Bayern Munich and a few other youth teams from the Bundesliga. So it's coming along. Right. It's coming along. It's still early days yet, but we're monitoring. We have strict KPIs on the number of centres, number of players, number of coaches that have to be added every year.
Okay, and I mean, what about like infrastructure? I mean, there has been talk all this while in Malaysia saying that we also need like fields everywhere, access to fields. We don't have enough fields, football fields for people to play and all that. Is this being addressed as well?
Well, you know, for the NFVP itself, we approach it by utilizing a dual-use policy. So one of the problems that we identified, of course, is the fact that the lack of quality fields at the district level. So where do we train these kids? So we teamed up with the Ministry of Education. So all our centres are based at schools, because normally schools, especially in daerah in the rural areas and all that, the best field is the school field. Yeah. So we use the school field for now. So that reduces our costs. We don't have to build new fields and stuff like that. Obviously in the future going forward, we'll want to make sure that we have better fields that the public can easily access. So that goes beyond just the school fields. But that's, I think, a phase after establishing the first phase of the NFVP, which is to ensure really that we use existing resources. Otherwise it's going to cost a lot of money. But I just wanted to say also that the NFVP is an open door. So people might say, oh, NFVP is only for the elite that are picked, but it's going to be open to everybody who has talent. And the door is a revolving door. So if you're good enough, you can join at any stage. It doesn't mean that just because your kid's 7-year-old doesn't get picked for the NFVP, can never be picked for the NFVP. Right. I've encouraged every district, every centre to have trials all the time. So kids are not making the grade, they go out of the program, new kids can come in, you see. Right. So we continue to open it up so that we have talent coming in all the time.
So if they keep on coming into the centres, shouldn't the NFVP also go towards the school, and then maybe the kids who don't go into the centres can still continue with these kind of programs, but in the school level?
Sure. Yeah. That is another track. So that's a track called MSSM,
Right, okay.
So MSSM will continue.
Yeah, that
so
will continue.
the kids who don't quite make the grade for the NFDP will continue to play MSSM. But if they excel at MSSM, katalah, there's a kid who didn't make it to the NFDP, but he's a late bloomer. And then our scouts, we have a lot of scouts, coaches on the lookout. You know, the teacher will come up. We have a portal saying that, look, if you have a video of a kid who's exceptional, upload it onto the portal, which we're going to launch. And we have a look at the kid. He's 13 years old. He may have been rubbish before. Suddenly he's bloomed. Come into the NFDP. Yeah. So the MSSM system continues.
Now, this is a program that's going to take a while, like you said, 10 years, and you'll see the results, right? How long will you be the Minister of Sports, you know, to ensure this goes along? What if somebody else comes over, takes over the portfolio? Is this going to continue?
Well, that's why it was important for PM to launch it on April 10th at the National Football Academy, Moqtada Hari National Football Academy in Pahang. That's going to be the centerpiece of the program. So the best of the best, the 500 best kids from 13 to 17 will live there, study there, and be based there. But aside from PM launching it and saying that this is a national program, I also brought it to Cabinet as a Cabinet paper. So once you have Cabinet approval, it becomes government policy, which is difficult to to change. It needs another Cabinet decision to change. So when I brought it to Cabinet, I said this is a national policy, and it should be institutionalized. Whoever becomes the sports minister. So hopefully it's there, and it's there until it bear success.
Yeah. You've also mentioned before that you can't just rely on the government to help develop football and sports and all this, and the corporate sector has to come in as well. What about corporate sponsorship? How important is it? How has it been so far? I mean, you see local corporations giving their money outside. We've had CIMB sponsoring Singapore players, young players like Fandi Ahmad's children. We have Air Asia sponsoring the BPL. What about local corporate sponsorship?
Well, I don't think that's entirely fair to the companies that you mentioned. For instance, CIMB, they have an ASEAN presence. So obviously they'll want to make sponsorships around the region, because they're not just a Malaysian bank, they're an ASEAN bank. And that doesn't mean that they haven't supported sports in Malaysia. Squash, Malaysian squash, which is one of our top performing sports because of Nicole. And some of the other players there, we were in Azlan previously, and a lot of juniors coming up, has been entirely almost supported by CIMB and CIMB Foundation. So it's easy to say, they sponsored 2 kids, Fandi's sons, they're not doing anything for us. They've done a lot for Malaysian sports. Same with Air Asia or Tune Group, Tony Fernandez basically, where essentially they are one of the biggest sponsors for the NFDP, and we don't see that, but we have a collaboration with QPR, for instance, which is funded entirely by the shareholders, the Malaysian shareholders of QPR, Tony, Kamaruddin, and Ruben, and we have an exchange program for coaches to get a stint at the QPR Academy. So these things aren't really mentioned or highlighted, but I'd say that yes, a lot of Malaysian companies do sponsor international sporting events, the BPL and stuff like that. It's understandable because of big returns, but they're starting to see the value of local sports, and many of them are starting to come in. And for the NFDP, half of the funds required to run the NFDP every year is actually private sector money. I managed to raise half of it private sector, and I went to PM and said I just need half of it from the government. And he was quite happy about that, because normally we do a big program like this and it's always the government funding it. But this time around, we got a lot of corporate sector coming in to support us, and that was great.
How do you? Is it difficult to convince them to come back to Malaysia, or do you have steps or measures put in place so that it will be attractive for them?
Well, I think a lot of them want to see clarity of vision and commitment of implementation, these two things. If you have a clear vision about where you want to take this over the next, in the case of NFDP, over the next 5-6 years, and they believe that you have the will to execute that vision, then I think they're willing to come in. I think that's really what corporates are looking for, beyond the tax breaks, beyond the access to the government and stuff like that. They really want something that they feel that they can believe in. I think the plan that we offered, the person that we put up to run it, Lim Tiong Kim, I think gave a lot of confidence to the corporates to come in and say, yeah, we'll do this.
Okay. I'd like to move on to politics now. In my whole adult life, there has never been a person in cabinet that is about my age bracket, you know. No. So now it's kind of nice to have someone there, you know. So this new brand of politics that you're talking about when you joined UMNO Youth, when you became chief of UMNO Youth and all this, do you think it's working? How relevant is it now? You know, changing of the guards and all this.
I think it's very relevant. I think you know, my party, UMNO, we have to undergo a process of regeneration in terms of our leadership. And I've been speaking about this. Now we are having our division AGM, so basically every week I'm officiating all the bahagia and all the divisions. And one of the things that I raise is that we have to have, in Malay, what is called the process peremajaan party, where we rejuvenate the party with more young talent. And I think this is what the public want to see. I mean, we have to remember that the voting demographic will change tremendously in 4 years' time. There'll be about 4 to 5 million new voters. And of course, many of them, by definition, will be young voters, voting for the first time, registering. And they have a natural affinity towards younger people. I'm not saying that age is everything. You know, an older person can empathize and be very youthful at heart and also appeal to young people. But I think young people also want to see their peers being given you know, a place at the highest level of leadership. And this is something that, you know, I don't particularly like to praise my political opponents, but this is something that they've been able to do a bit better than we have. Maybe because they are not, their parties, or at least PKR, a bit newer, and DAP is not a mass membership party. They're able to just parachute people in, young people in. UMNO is a very established party, so you know, you have to go through the entire process before you become somebody. But I think we have to allow for talent identification and to allow for those who have merit and those who have commitment towards the perjuangan and struggle and talented and can connect with young people. We have to be able to push them up quicker because I think people want to see this regeneration in the party.
Okay, talking about young people, right? How relevant is racial politics now to the young, to the youth in Malaysia?
I think it's still relevant, you know, and you have to define it, racial politics, in a much more discerning way. There's racial politics which is negative, which pits ethnic communities against each other. But there's a racial politics as well which essentially is about, you know, wanting to make sure that, you know, your community's interests are adequately taken care of. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I'm an UMNO leader as well as a Barisan National leader. Of course, the national interest is paramount for all Malaysians, but at the same time, I have an interest to make sure that, you know, whatever concerns of the Bumiputra Malay community are attended to. Same with the MCA and the MIC. So as long as the communal or the community interests does not supersede the national interests of harmony and justice for all Malaysians, I think there's nothing wrong with ethnic-based politics. But the negative side of racial politics, which is, you know, zero-sum game, which is that, you know, my community at the expense of yours, that's not on. You know, that's something that I think young people do not want to see. But if you ask the ordinary Malaysian, maybe in the Bangsa bubble they'll say, you know,
Bangsa bubble,
in the Bangsa bubble they'll say, you know, Malaysian first, that's the end-all and be-all. But why can't we celebrate our differences? You know, Malays, Chinese, Indian. And when you talk to them, they'll be like, yes, yeah, I do identify. I do want to pursue causes which are, you know, related to the Malay community or Chinese schools or, you know, Indian temples, for instance. You know, why can't they do that? So I think that part of it is still resonates amongst young people.
I think, why is it that the negative part of it is always being harped on so much?
I think because we are a bit, you know, we don't come down fast enough on the voices at the fringes of our society, the extremist voices, the voices who promote that kind of politics of fear, politics of hatred. And coming down, there are two ways of doing this. One, of course, is by law. Of course, I believe that we still need some form of legislation against hateful speech, against speech which insults religion, other people's race, and stuff like that. We still need that. We're an extremely sensitive society, so to speak. And the other way of coming down fast is through societal censure, meaning the society censures these people, saying that these people are terrible. So these two things have to go hand in hand. In the West, where you don't have laws, many laws against hateful speech or race hate and hate speech, they have societal censure.
That's right.
Which works in the West because they believe in freedom. You can say anything, but people can come down and say that's really silly. It doesn't work that much in Malaysia because people are still sensitive and rely on law. So you have to have two things. Both things have to work at the same time. And I think if we come down fast, both legally as well as society condemning these people in unison, then I think these voices will sort of evaporate.
In the last UMNO General Assembly, your speech, you listed 10 proposals, right? Some of them were for entrepreneurship and I think vocational and technical education. How's it coming along now? Has steps and action been taken?
A lot of the proposals that we bring up at the UMNO GA, since I've been leader of UMNO Youth, very specific proposals related to young people, related to the cost of living, related to capacity building, entrepreneurship, training. And many of these proposals have been taken on board. For example, vocational training, we raised it last year. There's been an expansion in the places for vocational training. I found myself running a ministry which looks after some of the vocational training centers. We've been able to expand the places, increase the quality. So these are things that we raise in order to make sure that the political platform that we have, the political platform that I have, is used to shape policy rather than just to give out political rhetoric, which does really help. And the other thing that we raised, for instance, last year and a couple of years ago, is to look at amending the Bankruptcy Act to make it easier for people who are bankrupt to get themselves out of that, to make sure that they are discharged as bankrupts. And, they're still studying amending the law to make it easier so that people have second chances. A lot of young people, credit card debt and stuff like that, they find themselves bankrupt. So we go for specific issues, housing, things like that, how we can improve things, and a lot of it is underway.
Okay. And how has it been as a minister? Is it like the sweet deal that everybody thinks it is? How has it been for you?
Well, I mean, it's very solemn and serious responsibility. People see the bells and whistles that come, with being a public official minister. But all of this, it doesn't mean anything if you don't discharge your duties well and uphold the people's trust. And there's one thing that I hold to is that I came here, I found myself as a minister not going through a very easy path. The last 5 years was extremely difficult. Political wilderness is not easy. But I told myself, I said, look, that's the nature of politics. You have to remember that today you can be in the wilderness, tomorrow you can be brought back and rehabilitated, but it can happen again. Politics, it's like a wheel. You can be up and down. So for as long as you are here, try to discharge your duty and to uphold the people's trust. But be prepared that one day you might not have this. So I think I'm honored and humbled that I have this opportunity to serve and to do it in a ministry which I'm very fond of. But it's not something that I view as, I made it and I've got to stay here for the rest of my life. I think that's not the right way to approach this.
Okay, back to what you said just now about you feel that hate speech and things like this it should not be allowed, and there should be legislature against it and all this. I know that you are a strong advocate of non-media censorship. I mean, you believe in the media, right? They need to be free. What's your take on that? Yeah.
Of course, I believe in press freedom, but I think in a country like Malaysia, we have to draw some boundaries.
Okay.
And there are certain issues, especially issues surrounding religion, ethnicity, race, the royalty. These are issues which I think have to be treated with tremendous sensitivity. So I think when there are insults against religion, any religion, whether it's Christianity, Buddhism, Hindu, Islam, whatever it is, I think we have to take quick action. Because when you have a laissez-faire attitude, a hands-off attitude towards these things, the public's trust towards law enforcement agencies, agencies that uphold the law, can be eroded. And I think a lot of people, even young people, you know, people who you would assume are more liberal, more open, more tolerant, feel that there has to be certain boundaries in speech. You know, people going online and insulting religion, or, you know, people uploading videos of preachers insulting other religions. This riles up a lot of Malaysians and say, you know, just take action. And I think it's good, because we take quick action against this kind of this form of speech, then people won't be obsessed about this anymore. We're spending far too much time, you know, trolling the internet, looking for people who are making racially hateful comments, religiously insulting comments and stuff like that. It's a tremendous waste of our energy and of national discourse as well. So if you have quick action, siapa-siapa cakap, just take quick action. That's it. So people are happy, they're like, okay, you can't insult anyone anymore. So nobody does it. And our attention can be focused on more important issues, like competitiveness, like good governance, like the education system, like being a better, more competitive nation. So a lot of our energy is being wasted on things which the law should just take care of, saying that you can't. These are, I mean, like for instance in Thailand, whether you like it or not, you cannot insult. Yeah, I mean, you do it and it's you're done for. Here it's like, okay, you can do it, and then some people do it. Or what about this selective prosecution? I mean, just get it done so that no one does it.
So it has to be a really clear line.
Really clear. But you know, everything else is fair comment. I mean, I'm a politician. You know, there's stuff like in the Sedition Act. I mean, I have a problem with some stuff in the Sedition Act, for instance, where it says that you cannot criticize the government. I think that's fair. You know, that's you can't. The precise wording I can't remember, but you can't menimbulkan rasa hatred towards the government. You know, I think that's archaic already in this day and age. And criticizing government is fine. You want to criticize me, that's okay. But if you slag off, you know, somebody's religious practice, somebody's God or something like that, I don't think that's on in Malaysia.
Okay. You're also a very, very strong voice on social media, Twitter, Instagram, things like that. Do you enjoy using Twitter?
Well, there are days you enjoy using it. There are days that you don't really enjoy using it. I mean, you know, it's a great way of reaching out to the public. I use social media because it's quick, it's fast, and you know, you get instant response, and you get response which is unadulterated. You know, basically people don't. You know, if I were to meet somebody face to face, I don't think they'd say the same thing to me as they would write on Facebook or Twitter. So on Twitter and Facebook, you actually read something that is far more visceral in terms of their response. It's good because you can see what the initial response is like. So I like using social media because of that. Obviously, you have to take some of it with a pinch of salt. It is social media. Some of it is just, you know, plain old trolling. Some of it is just egging you on, trying to, you know, elicit a response from you. You can't respond to everything out there. You can't react to everything out there. You have to pick and choose. You have to see what's real, what's legit, what's not legit, what's just people trying to kneel you and, you know, force you to, you know, commit a mistake. So, you know, there are days where you get criticized a lot on social media from whatever you say, out of context, not in context. So there are pros and cons to it, but you know, it's if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. So you know, once you embrace social media, you have to be ready to accept whatever comes your way.
You're posting it personally, right?
Yeah. You know, I post my tweets are all personally posted. Most of my Facebook statuses are posted by myself, unless, of course, you can see somebody else posting them. That's admin, but basically that's mostly just ministerial official stuff. But if stuff that is spoken in my voice, I will do it myself.
You've had some heated arguments going on in Twitter as well. I remember Zulkifli Nordin, there was this, when you asked him to keep quiet after what he said, something that was really offensive. I think I retweeted your tweet as well, you know. Is Twitter useful for things like that as well, you know, to...
Well, sometimes I think, you know, when something happens very quickly and there's immediate response from the public, I think people want to see public officials take a certain stand. I think that particular case, Zulkifli Nordin, I think, responded to YB Khairy Singh's
That's right.
death. And, you know, there's no religion in the world, including his and my own religion, Islam, which encourages you or allows you to make disparaging remarks about somebody's death. And this is what he did. So, you know, I thought it was wrong, and perhaps the word I used, I didn't ask him to keep quiet, I asked him to shut up, actually. Perhaps the choice of my words also did not reflect our values, but I think he deserved it in that particular case. I mean, I'd be very careful in using the term shut up because it's not entirely polite, but in that particular case, I thought he deserved it, because I don't think you should. And this was just a couple of hours after we heard news that, that Khairy had passed away. And he'd been making disparaging remarks, you know, drawing parallels to the fact that Khairy was an opponent of the implementation of hudud, and therefore he, whatever. Yeah. So I thought, you know, you have to call people out. You know, if you don't call people out, if you don't say that, you know, this is wrong, then people will not know that there are people in a position of public trust that can call these kind of people out.
There was also another Twitter user, Shasha Mahmud, who replied the question that you posted, where was the last Commonwealth Games held? And she said, di dalam hati kami berdua. That was an interesting saga, and it was nice the way you handled it. It was interesting. What do you think of that?
Well, I get so many Twitter comments, and you know, I just thought it was funny, so I just retweeted it, you know, because people are so creative in in what they say, and sometimes it's very embarrassing, but you know, I just thought I share that because it was just such a wacky response.
Did she get her T-shirt?
I think so. I mean, you know, we did it in conjunction with the Malaysian Heroes, the new national sports uniform, and I think I asked a question about Commonwealth Games, and she gave a really left field answers, which was everyone's like, give her T-shirts. I'm like, oh, whatever.
Talking about T-shirts and all this. Your fashion sense, you have a very prominent fashion sense. Do you consider yourself a hipster?
What's a hipster?
I mean, check out your band, your wristbands, and your new Baju Melayu trend that that you're using.
Well, I don't know if I'm a hipster or not. It's just you know, this is what how I've been for so long. You know, I'm of the view that as long as I look decent for whatever it is I show up to, then that's fine. You know, I mean, I feel that you have to be sesuai dengan keadaan lah. You know, that's the most important thing. You know, the rest of it is just your own personality and how you want to express that. It's fine.
It's nice to look cool, right?
That's not for me to say, I guess.
Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you very much, and
Thank you very
it's
much.
been a pleasure sitting down with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.